I have the privilege of presenting the IDF in the Institute and learning many things, particularly free, unconditional thinking, but also trying and give of my insight, of our insight, through our conservative manner in the IDF. I'll try to express the security aspect of the components in the security perception and how, as a military, as a system, we already interpret them differently, we think differently, and we try to adjust all the elements. Ultimately, I think it's going to reach some sort of an equilibrium with a full suggestion that the Institute is going to hand to the government. I think that Aviv had a very good survey of threats, strategically, operationally, and if we would ask ourselves now, we as a military view these threats, or as a state, what do we do with these threats? So if we take into account all 9 components and try to align them on some sort of a scale, a continuum between the various threats. On the one hand side, we will put the nuclear threat, the Iranian nuclear threat. On the other hand side, jihad, terrorism, from nuclear to knife. And if we put in the midst those collisions, local collisions, or the limited fighting with Hamas on the south and Hezbollah on the north, in the middle of the spectrum we have conventional wars between militaries, we would see that we are now entering a decade, or at least 5 years' time, where the main threats on the state of Israel are on the extremes, the two sides between nuclear and knife, and they are getting farther away from the issue of conventional war. We're talking about the upcoming years. Is it possible that within a decade the entire reality will shift and change? The Middle East will reach a point of equilibrium, which is a new point with other sorts of armies? The answer is yes. And I estimate that this is the direction it's going. However, in the upcoming few years, the threat of armies invading Israel, this was the threat in light of which our founding fathers wrote their security perception. Is this no longer here? Yes. We have to be ready for limited war that could happen immediately following some sort of deterioration, a very harsh event like kidnapping, and then reach very a harsh acceleration like firing at Tel Aviv or Israel, but this will be limited to a few days' time, and then we'll have a different steady state of a routine. And so the division we had done in the IDF between routine, emergency, which is particularly those events like Hast-led operation or Pillar of Fire, very limited war, and war which is an event that has very low likability in upcoming years. What are the principles of war, principles of perception, in light of which the government will instruct us? How should we operate? What should we do? One principle that connects to the main component is to try and prevent the war as much as possible. This is a constant. It is dealt with through negotiation, through an activity that refers to large forces, tanks, aircraft, etc., and also determination in operating the forces. Determination is no less important than obtaining the forces themselves and their presence. The other instruction would be the shortest time span of a war. Our strategic depth is short and small. Our demographic depth and our economic depth is small. We have not changed, and so war has to be short. Short for the benefit of the front, and short for the benefit of the home front and economy. We'll have to make sure that there is minimum damage to the home front. The victory will not be determined in the front in Binchvel, but it will be a result of our national resilience, that clashing between various communities or people, we do it in an accurate manner, they don't. And on this ground, we'll probably have a victory that is seen differently here and there, and we each go back to our crowd. Our mission will be to make sure that there's minimum damage to home front and a very clear victory perception. We're going to need superpowers, backup. Cooperation is an understatement of what we would require. As always, we're going to have the superpowers backing us up for any complex operation. This was always an instruction, and this will continue to be even deepened. We will need legitimization as an instruction, and because of that, we're trying to be as accurate as possible in our operations. We would want to rehabilitate our deterrence. Deterrence is examined in hindsight. We'll need to build it up again for the next war. This will probably be the instructions on the government side. As far as perception goes, we talked about deterrence, you can see it here as well. Is deterrence relevant facing nuclear threats? Is it relevant only when Israel is doing it with its capabilities? What about deterrence facing terrorism? Terrorism that has no responsibility over land, that enforces itself on people like World Jihad or other terrorism. How do you manage deterrence facing this sort of terrorism? Is this why we can say that deterrence continues to be the main asset that we have in trying to prevent the next war? I would like to suggest that this is so. Deterrence on a large scale, a shaping sort of deterrence, will have many more components apart from that of the presence of forces. It's not only the number of tanks and aircraft that are counted. I think that determination in operating the forces will have to be a main factor. The fighting between the various battles, what we're doing now under the radar of media and public, this will continue being a main component, cooperation, and moreover, joint planning of intelligence and operations will continue, being particularly with the United States, but also other European countries. This is how we can fight terrorism. Moreover, we're going to need a lot of intelligence. And this is why intelligence was mentioned so many times earlier. So I would not part from deterrence so quickly, but I think that we're going towards shaping deterrence. The second term was warning. The ability to know when war would occur, operating the entire economy, and putting all resources of the state into this fund of war, fund as a metaphor. Is this relevant now? This is a question. We don't need a warning of 72 hours, 48 hours. We need a warning of 8 hours perhaps, sometimes, or even an hour, or a warning of 12 hours for targeted killing, like we did at the Pillar of Fire. We're going to need strategic intelligence as well, because we're dealing now with what do the Iranians really want, what is hiding there. We want to know what Abu Mazen really intends, what does the Hamas and Islamic Jihad want. And so intelligence here is very central. It does not only deal with telling us when war will erupt. Intelligence has to be multidimensional, dealing with all ranges, all types of organizations, from the strategic level onto this small pixel of where exactly should we attack in Lebanon in order to attack the particular missile launcher, etc. This is great investment, but we're shifting towards intelligence supremacy. The second point is Army, Reserve Army. This is the main force of protecting Israel, but this ritual of getting people to come to reserve service, this cannot follow the regular schedule. After one time when we draft people and they're not operative, the second time we're going to have the same story that we had before the Yom Kippur, the 1973 war. You bring the entire reserve. Is every event worth an attack only after you draft everybody? No, the model of operation has to be faster. We talked about short wars. We talked about a different sequence of events. And so it is very obvious for us that we're going to need to go into this world of drafting people on reserve. We have to increase the dominance of the entire regular army service. We're going to have Navy and land, regular forces, and we'll have to come up with a different type of availability and flexibility in operating those forces that is relevant for the events. I suggest we include after warning a term that is called alertness and readiness. We can have a lot of forces that are ready, that are based on deterrence, but one terrorist attack of world jihad, like the one at Kerem Shalom, where they tried to put half a ton in a truck after an armed car they stole from the Egyptian army, for which they killed several Egyptian soldiers going back to Kerem Shalom, to the resident area, and bring on a massive terrorist attack. This brings us to a strategic event. This is a strategic occurrence that turns the entire Middle East upside down, puts it in a whole different place, and so the approach should be that of deterrence, because facing this sort of terrorism, we have a problem with the content of our reaction, and again it brings you to a threshold of a strategic problem due to a local terrorist occurrence. Determination, decisiveness. How do you decide the enemy? So it's very clear that all commanders in charge have to uphold their military task. They have to break the enemy's will. This is in free terms. Can we have strategic decisiveness today in the same manner? Is maneuvering fast? Does it have to fast go into the battle there, as was envisioned by Ben Gurion and all our forefathers in the IDF in recent years? What is the importance of the maneuvering? On the other side, these are heavy questions. What is obvious is that we have to have a very clear picture of victory that is connected to national resilience. On the operative level, it will not change. It's very clear that between very direct fire and maneuvering, the point of equilibrium has shifted, and we're going to want a lot more capability of quick destruction of thousands of targets per day, including targets that are arguable, dual targets that are terrorists as well as infrastructure targets, in order to bring to a situation where perhaps we will not need this maneuvering. But from what is occurring nowadays in Syria, in past wars, and definitely Second Lebanon War, we understand that we might need maneuvering, and this would have to be fast, deep in the front, because as you saw with the Amman, the head of intelligence, the entire front is the entire enemy state, and so we have to work simultaneously on all areas and all spaces. It's a harsh, heavy war, many casualties on both sides, and many implications, and I assume that we're going to try and avoid it or try to resolve the problem and achieve a ceasefire under our conditions, which is, I think, what we can define modestly as a decisiveness on a strategic level as early as possible. Protection and national resilience, I put these two together. Home front is the front, or home front is in the front, before the front even. Before the soldier on reserves is there, his family already has to go to the shelter. The Chief of Staff understands it, Ministry of Security understands that, and I'm not sure that we need a special office in order to explain it. Ministry of Defense has to make all decisions in the front as a function of what is happening in the home front. It used to be the other way around. We had to decide things in the front, and the home front had to stay calm and serve the front. Today, reality shifted a bit. Today, most terminology of deciding the war, most of the things are taken in the home front, and the front itself has to serve as smart as possible the interactivity of the state, which is shaped in the home front inside the country. And so there is no doubt that protection is one of the central goals of the army, whether it is national resilience, air, and talking to the local municipalities, and this is going to accompany us in the future. Last remark, as far as cooperation goes, I think that this is saying cooperation is belittling. By definition, we have to understand that facing the story of Iran and terrorism, we have to have joint planning, from cooperation to joint operation. This is the military necessity, strategic necessity, and I think that if we do it, particularly with the United States and intelligence in Europe, we'll be able to adjust ourselves to the next challenge. Thank you.